Well, welcome to the very last episode of Low Gear. We've thoroughly enjoyed the last 8 years when we started off the show with a program called Toll New Zealand Talking Trucks. And then we decided, well, we've 3 years, we've done 120 shows of Talking Trucks, so maybe it's time to just change it a wee bit. So we changed the name to Low Gear, which means we can now include the machines, the tractors, and anything else pretty much with a piston, but still looking at the commercial side of New Zealand's vehicle history. So what do you think was one of the most embarrassing bits of our show that have been so far?
I will focus straight away on the most embarrassing, but I think that must have been the day that T Radar was watching your show, because T Radar has a program called Best Fits, and he happened to see this part where Bill had been climbing into a truck but chatting away to the camera at the same time. And he just didn't turn round to look at the camera. He just got in and he was looking at the dashboard, and me with the camera outside, I just had Billy Ho's bottom of the screen. So I thought at the time, oh well, never mind, he will edit that bit out. But no, he didn't edit it out. And so suddenly he became very famous because T Radar was watching, and at the end of his series he presented Bill with this award for having his bottom on the screen for so long. So we're very proud of that. Well done, Billy Ho.
Thank you very much.
Only for us.
So I presented it twice.
Yes. And that's for all, I'm presenting it now for all those other embarrassing bits that T Radar didn't see.
And we do have bloopers, or well, not very many. We're Celia Pants Productions, I suppose you could call us, in that normally it's just a one-take shot. Sometimes when I start, I've been introduced to somebody, his name is David, and for some reason I've got George in my head. Maybe it was the person we interviewed last, or his brother was named George, or something like that. But anyway, I say, now, welcome to another series of Low Gear, and with me is George, and his name's David. And I thought, so I have to spit that bit out, and we start again, but we get it right in the end. And another thing that we've found is if somebody, you've arrived somewhere and somebody's just itching to tell you about his international, or his tractor, or his truck, or his motorbike, or whatever it is he has, and he's passionate about it, absolutely passionate about it. And so it's difficult sometimes to sort of get him to tell you the story, so you've got a rough idea where it's all going to go. But if you get him to say it a second time with the cameras rolling, it's just not the same, is it?
No, all the passion's gone. He's thinking to himself, I've already told you this, Bill. And so he just minimises all the emotion. So suddenly the story's not really worth listening to, really.
And so from that we learned a lesson. We just turn the cameras on and start bang, straight away we're on. And the passion comes through. You know, he's telling it the first time and it's all exciting. You know, Bill, you should see this, and it's done this and it's done that, and here's some photographs, and you know, which was when I was a boy, and it was still going. So to get the passion from the people who we're interviewing, it's best just to do it as a one shot. Stop, whatever. So then we down at Edendale, and the crank up weekends, they were absolutely great, and they continue. I'm sure they'll have one next January. But to go there and just see the lineup of tractors and farm machinery and traction engines and people and all the, like they put a whole row of spuds on the end of a stick. And you've got to go with your tractor, pick up the spud, go back, chuck it in the bucket, go a bit further back, put further back, put further back. And even traction engines will have a go at this. And those traction engines, sure, they've been around since, previous to 1900, the turn of last century. And they're just fire and they're alive. They just sit there going,
No, they're members of the family, really, in the South Island anyway. If someone has a traction engine, it's handed on down, and at a very young age the children are taught how to work it and control it, and then ultimately it's handed on to them. It's just a family member, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
I always think they're alive. And the big thrill is when they all line up and they all do their musical horn. Just now looking back into history with the traction engines and the steam, it was thought about 1915 that steam was going to be the way that vehicles were going to go. But no, that's not what happened. They were Stanley steamers, a steamer called the Brooks that ran on steam. These were steam cars, and they had steam trucks. And you might remember last week, I spoke to a bloke who had a Foden that wasn't built until 1929. It was a steam truck in 1929. And I said, isn't that a bit late? And he says, no, the newfangled diesel engines and petrol engines were expensive, but it was still cheaper to build a steam engine for the city councils, and so that's the reason they did that. So from 1929, 1930, they were still building new steam engines. But Mr. Ford, he invented the Tin Lizzie, and what you did with the Tin Lizzie was you cranked up the front, it's running, and away you go. Whereas with a steam car, the Stanley steamer, it takes about half an hour to get it all warmed up. Hey, kids, go and warm that car up. We're leaving for town in half an hour. So you got to get this thing going, and you know, off to town you go. But tell us the story about the Stanley steamer.
Oh. Well, our friend Dave inherited a Stanley steamer, and it hadn't been operating since 1954, which is a long time ago. And we went down to film this great event, and all the locals turned up. So Dave, of course, had never operated it before, but he had a handbook. So we all stood around and we were helping him trying to get it going. And of course, a steam car, at one point it starts to steam. And all the steam is right. It was a sort of a rainy day, and it was a lot of moisture in the air anyway. And all this hissing and bubbling and all this noise, and everyone backed away from the car. And Bill pushed me in the back and said, you go and get in it and film it. I said, oh, okay. I guess my life isn't worth all that much, really. So I hopped into the back, and Dave got into the front. And off we went down the road, and it was just fabulous. There was no engine noise. There was just the sound of the tyres on the road, that's all, just a sort of a hum. Oh, it was a great day in the end.
So when they came back, I got in it as well in the front with Dave, and Linda's in the back, and off we went, and the thing ran out of steam just about. We just about had to get out and push it the last 100 metres to get it back to where it was. But anyway, it came back in a big cloud of steam. But an interesting experience, and as I was saying, the steam cars were still around in the early 20s, but they died a natural because they couldn't really compete with a $500 Tin Lizzie. So we sort of start with the trucks, and it's just interesting that everything has been invented. You know,
Electric cars.
Electric cars in 1920. Everybody's raving on about electric cars now, but it was all about electric cars. In fact, our good mate Gordon Malcolm, who has a couple of three beautifully restored international trucks that he's had since new, and he showed me a photograph. He said, here's some trucks, Bill. They're all lining up to unload their milk cans at the Waitoa Dairy Factory, but the thing about them is they're all electric. They went for about 60 miles on their charge, and they went and got their milk cans, and they came all emptied all out, and then they charged them up at the end of the day. And I said, what happened to those? And he said, we buried them. They buried them. So the only remaining electric truck, as we saw a few programs ago, it was called a Walker, and it lives in Christchurch, in an electric company in Christchurch. And they had it at the South Bridge 150th anniversary of Southbridge being a town. So this truck was there. So it was just interesting to see the only remaining electric truck. but it came from about 1920. And the interesting thing is that in 1920 there were 135, this is what my research tells me, 135 companies in the world manufacturing electric vehicles. One of the other interesting aspects of what we've been doing is the passion that's associated with a particular truck. And I must say, when I found the old TM Bedford that I used to drive for foodstuffs, sitting under a tree looking very dead, there was you poor old thing. If I had some bucks, I'd buy it and bring it back to what it used to look like. But just that passion there. And maybe tell them the story about Sally and Graham.
Oh, a friend of ours, Alex McClellan, down in Balclutha, he actually had the truck that Graham Poulter used to drive when he was a young man, and we had a program about Graham, and Alex's son saw the show and said, "I think that's our truck, Dad." So anyway, sure enough, it was. And so we surreptitiously agreed we would bring Graham down to meet his old truck without telling him. So we said to Graham and his wife Sally, "Come on down to the South Island for a bit of a trip." Off they came with us, and we ended up at Alex's place, and Alex revealed the truck, and it was a very, very emotional moment. Graham wasn't absolutely convinced it was his truck, but then he said to Alex, I actually had an old train horn in this truck, and I had the control for it under the seat. There was a button under the seat. And Alex said, "Oh gosh, we wondered what that was for. The horn wasn't there, but the control." And sure enough, there it was. Well, Graham was really moved and in tears almost to find that it was actually his old truck. So he went for a ride in it, and he just got into it and drove it like he'd been driving it for 50 years. He's just really at home behind the wheel. And in fact, Graham has recently passed away, and Sally, his wife, is giving Alex the train horn back to go back into that truck. So that's a very emotional thing to be happening. Graham never revealed how he acquired the train horn. One can only imagine.
Yes. And I'm sure when Alex drives his truck up behind something and gives it the old 1-2 with the train horn, and it'll sort of wake whoever's pissing him off side ears up.
And of course, we haven't only been looking at trucks. We've also looked at trains and planes and anything that's old, really. Yes,
we've one of the things I heard about but never actually seen was an engine you started with a cartridge. And I thought there was actually a truck, something like an Oshkosh or something like that you actually put a shell into something and you screwed it up and you banged it and it started the truck. But I haven't actually found that yet. But what we did find was with the Field Marshal tractor. We down at Southbridge once again, and met a farmer whose father used one of these Field Marshals, and it still goes. And you could buy a box of cartridges, and they're all got Field Marshal, like shotgun cartridges, and they're all in a box. And then you had to go through this rigmarole, I suppose you could call it a rigmarole. You had to turn this, push that, line this up, and then light a piece of paper. And you put that into the front. And then everything's all lined up, and then you put the cartridge in and you shut the little door and screw it up. And a little firing pin stick out, and then you hit it with a hammer, bang, poof, and away the whole thing goes. But you've got to think about the technology. At the time, somebody's thought about, if we put this shell in here and we hit it, it'll go bang and it'll cause this, effect that gets this engine going. So you've got to wonder, what's going on in people's heads in the 1920s and 30s, how to get an engine started. And then there's the other one at Southbridge once again, the old Lands Bulldog. You've got to set fire to the front of the bloody thing to everything all lined up once again, and when it's hot, you take the steering wheel out put it in the side and you give it the old one to it, and poof, boom, 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 away that goes. And then you put the steering wheel back in it and off you go down the road. But you know, the technology of the great big huge single cylinder engines, you know, just the technology and the people who thought it all up, it just fascinates me. You know, how one thing will work in this country and the same similar thing has been invented in another country, but in 1920, the 19 teens, there's no formal sort of, you can't just ring people up or send them an email or a photograph or anything, but even the Japanese, it was pretty remote sort of a place, the Chinese, the Russians, and you know, the Europeans, the Americans, and they're all inventing at the same time. So I was just wondering where this thought pattern going around the world on how to make an engine, how to make a vehicle, how to make it go faster, go stronger. It was just amazing. And then we come to the quarry. You know, one of our most popular shows was the going up to Stockton and seeing the work that goes on up there, shifting coal and shifting the dirt and stuff off the top of the coal, stripping they call that. And the great big 575 dozer, the biggest bulldozer in the world. This was our most popular show. I think we had something like 100,000 odd people look at this particular episode, and it's when they transported the machinery from Stockton. They put it on 6 or 7 trucks. The body, the tracks, the blade, you know, everything had to come up on the truck, on the ferry and all the way up to Auckland. And at the back of this quarry, the team came up from Westport and they bolted it all back together again and kicked her in the guts, and away it went. And Linda's sort of hanging off the side of that while we, you know, just
Bill got to drive it. Yeah, and I had to film him driving it. It was interesting.
But a massive, great V12 engine that drives it, and the blade, you know, it was just colossal, absolutely colossal. But just as part of our upcoming tour in November, if you haven't already decided you might like to come on it, part of the tour is going to see both of those 575 superdozers, the Komatsu superdozers. But again, as I said, it's just amazing what's popular, and over 100,000 people watching that particular show. That was just amazing. And then the D8s, even the D8s. Remember the old bloke we spoke to in Twizel,
Yes.
Max?
Yes.
And Max is getting up there with the age of that 88 or might even be 90. He's sitting in his old D8 that he restored, and it's sitting in a shed that's, you know, you probably just get a couple of cars in, but there's enormous D8 sitting in it. And he said, Bill, I could sit here for the rest of my life. I just love it. I just love it. In about 2009, we went to the truck show at Mystery Creek, and we met Barry Caulfield for the first time, and he had his big Pacific there. Remember that?
I do.
And we said to Barry, we're embarking on a truck show, and he looked at us. Oh, okay. And could we come and do a story about your Pacific? It was all painted up in forest products colours, and it looked absolutely magnificent. And then when we got down there, we took it for a ride. And
We took it along a farm road, and unbeknownst to the farmer, and we came in this huge Pacific. We were way up near, came around this corner, and the farmer was coming the other way in his car. He must have got a terrible shock, because he actually sort of disappeared under our bonnet, which is way up in the air. So, what a thing to meet on your farm track.
so Barry climbed out, and they exchanged words, and he got it sorted. And he backed up a bit, the farmer, and we went past, turned around and came back. But Barry's collection of trucks is absolutely amazing. All of them have a story to tell about his particular neck of the woods in Edgecombe. His father, Sandy Caulfield, was a well-known truckie, you know, in the area. And in that particular show, which was our very first show, we had my uncle Harry Wills had a a trucking business in Minganui called Minganui Transport. And he had 7 or 8 trucks, including a guy. I think he had 2 guy trucks. And one of the things I remember about that was showing us a photograph of a 100-foot log sitting on the back of this guy truck. We had to put 2 logs on first, and then there's 100-foot on top of that, so the bum didn't actually drag on the ground. But there are other trucks in our travels that we've met along the way, and one of them was a Leyland Cub, and it too had a great big enormous log on the back of it, and what they were is turned into logging spars. They sort of stand them up and run the wires off them, and they use them like for winches for dragging up the logs to the skids. And going back to Des Phelps, that's Fred Phelps, his father, and Fred's not with us anymore. But his father had all these old photographs of trucks. And one of them that I thought was amazing, and I still think is amazing, is the autocar. Some autocars came to New Zealand, and a bloke down at Dunedin used it as a transporter. And another one was in Christchurch, and another one was in Gisborne, and that was a logging truck. But the cab, obviously, you can see the cab, there it is, working away, and then suddenly it's got no doors on it. And then suddenly the cab's off it, well, up to the firewall, and so in order to put another cab, they put a comma cab. They've got a comma truck from somewhere, and they put the cab on this auto car so it can continue to work.
And talking about autocars, I was in New York less than a year ago, and I took a photo of an autocar that was still operating. It was a rubbish truck plying the streets of New York. It was quite a sight.
Yeah. So our trip to America was something special, and that was about 8 shows that came out of that, looking at the buses to start off with, and then we spoke to a few guys about their logging trucks that are all just sort of parked up where they stopped. But one of the interesting things is that the GMC, and GMCs, there were lots of them came to New Zealand, which pretty much made New Zealand. They were logging trucks and all sorts of different uses for the GMCs. And they made apparently about 800,000 of them for the Second World War. They also made Studebaker trucks, and they went to Russia. And then I think the war came to an end, and there was another, 500 or something waiting to go to Russia, but the Russians just didn't want them anymore, so they went to Australia. So Australia had a few war Studebakers that did pretty much the same job as the GMCs and the Internationals were doing here. But one of the stories about these that were logging trucks was that Snow Brown, remember Snow Brown? He'd restored his International military truck, which was part of the Navy, to a logging truck, and it was a ton. It was a ton and a half. That's what it was built for, like just a ute. And he had to get out onto the road for some reason. He wasn't on the main road for very long, but when the cops pulled him over and weighed him up, he was 28 tonne on this 1.5 tonne rated truck. But a lot of people have told me, some of the old truck drivers have said to me, Bill, if it can move, it wasn't overloaded. But some of the logs, some of the native logs especially, they're coming out on those trucks of the 1918, 1920, these poor old Fords and Chevs and Whites, and they've got logs on them. It's got to be the thick end of nearly 40 tonne, these kauri logs and bigger trees, and it's just amazing what those poor old machines did. But previous to that, of course, it was all just pull them out with horse things, so we'll pull them out with oxen, bullocks. That's it, bullocks. So we've certainly come a long way in our quest to make New Zealand great. We've done that. It was all done the hard way, and I'm pretty sure, and a lot of you will probably agree with me, that if we had to build New Zealand again, we probably wouldn't be able to do it, and the paperwork would just be too enormous. The risks taking would be, you can't do that. No, you can't do that. You just can't do that. But it's been done before. Guys hanging a bulldozer at the top of a ravine and having a digger on the end of that while it digs its way down while you lay pipes and then winching back up again. Hauling logs out. And one of the interesting things I always thought was our interview with John Curry. And John Curry is a bushman. He's a lovely man, but he lives in a little whare out in the bush in the back of Westport. And you can actually go with Mickey Ryan from Out West Tours in Westport, and he'll take you out there as a touristy trip. And John will show you the bushcraft things that he's very, very good at, and some old Maori sites up the back there that are very interesting. But he is an interesting man, and he said the day that the tin hats turned up for the bush was a very dangerous day because you couldn't hear. Suddenly all that, your hearing's been taken away from you because you got this hat on, so you couldn't hear cracks, you couldn't hear this, and suddenly it's become a dangerous place by just simply by putting on a tin hat. It was just, I thought that, that's amazing. Everybody just wearing a black singlet and shorts back in the day, pair of boots, and you just got on with it. When I was driving a truck, one of the things I really enjoyed was a hot pie and a cold ice cream. And so you had a hot pie in this hand, you had a mouthful of that and a lick of the ice cream, your knees on the steering wheel of the truck as you're going along the Natia straight, and pie, ice cream, pie, ice cream. And when you finish, of course, you go back to driving the truck. Anybody else actually enjoy a hot pie and an ice cream together? Yeah, that's something I really enjoyed. But anyway, so that's what we're going to be doing next. A program called The Good Old Days. So we expect to start on the first Tuesday at 7:30 here on Face TV in November. So it's about the 7th of November, I think it might be, or the 5th. But anyway, put that in your diary. The Good Old Days starts in early November. So we look forward to seeing you then. We've thoroughly enjoyed bringing you low gear and talking trucks over the last 8 years. It's been fun. We've met hundreds and hundreds of people who have put us up and fed us and shown us their treasures. It's amazing what's in sheds around this country. It's just absolutely amazing. The hospitality of everybody who we've enjoyed the company of, it's been great. And we've made friends along the way. I don't think we could go anywhere in New Zealand now and break down. We'd be 10 minutes from somebody we know. And we've thoroughly enjoyed it, and we hope you have too. We'd like to take this opportunity now to thank Toll New Zealand, who sponsored the Toll New Zealand Talking Truck Show. They did that for 3 years, 120 shows. And we'd also like to thank David Swap and J Swap Stock Foods and J Swap Contractors for their help in sponsoring the first 3 years of Low Gear. And for the last 24 shows, we've had ProTrans, Earth Movers and Christchurch have been sponsoring the show. So thank you very much to Jared and his team for looking after us and bringing us to this point now. So it's a little bit sad that we have to say goodbye. So if you've got nothing to do and you're bored and you want to watch a bit of history, you can just go to www.lowgear, click on the Vimeo link, and you can watch a whole weekend's worth of Low Gear trucks and planes and trains and anything else that's got a piston. So thank you very much once again, and we'll see you sometime soon.
Bye.
Bye.